Every school has their quirks, but there are some institutions out there who take the cake in weird rules. I can't imagine how hard my life would have been if I had to get good grades, make friends, and follow all these crazy rules. I guess it's true. Being a kid is kinda hard. After watching the movie Up, Florida high school teacher Mrs. Bailey Kutkump allegedly brought in a plastic dog collar for her students to wear as an optional punishment. If they didn't want to sit at the tardy table, which was a separate table in the classroom where late students would sit, they could opt to wear the cone of shame. She said that most kids wanted to wear the collar because they thought it was funny. She showed the movie to her students and they started to ask about the cone of shame that Doug was forced to wear by the other dogs. She was put under fire when students started posting pictures of each other wearing the cone of shame on Facebook. This caused an uproar in the parent community, who then urged the superintendent to fire Mrs. Bailey Kutkump. Even though it was all in good fun, the parents thought otherwise. No one puts their kid in the corner. French people are known for being a little frou-frou, but French cafeterias may have taken things a bit too far. In schools across France, fries are only served one day a week, which is when students are allowed to have their weekly serving of ketchup. Every other day, it's traditional French fare. This is all in an attempt to educate the students on their country's culinary history, as well as to keep their culture from getting too American. And to be honest, there's a little too much Americanization going on, especially with France being McDonald's #1 European consumer. Kids in the States can get in trouble for violating a dress code, but what about a hair code? According to a Tokyo news outlet, 57% of Japanese high schools require students to prove that their hair color is their original shade from birth by looking at their baby photos, while other schools will only require a signed note from the parents. Japanese schools generally like a uniform look, and when someone jumps out of the norm, even a little bit, it seemed like a big act of rebellion. Some schools will even pressure international students to dye their hair black and straighten it in order to look like the rest of the group. Japan is generally obsessed with perfectionism, clean lines, and uniformity, so this hair rule actually makes a lot of sense. Boys are also included in this rule, and aren't allowed to spike their hair or wear it longer than where their collar touches their neck. The reason for all this? Birth rate decline. With the lowered birth rate in Japan, schools are competing for parents' attention, especially the higher-end private ones. So having their students look perfect in uniform is one more feather in their perfectly clean hat. Deborah Hernandez, the head teacher at Kilmer Middle School in Virginia, has implemented a no-touching policy after a 12-year-old was caught putting his arm around his girlfriend's shoulder during lunch break. He was instantly taken to the principal's office and reprimanded for the inappropriate touching, which might seem a little extreme considering his age, but he was really just giving her an over-the-shoulder hug, something we do to our own grandparents. Mrs. Hernandez immediately put her new rule into action, saying that students need to know that their physical personal space is being respected. Her no-contact ban includes handshakes, high-fives, and hugs. Students are basically not allowed to touch each other. I don't know about you, but Mrs. Hernandez sounds like a bit of a wet blanket. A high school in Chicago has implemented a new rule stating that students are only allowed to go to the bathroom during class 3 times per semester. That's 6 times throughout the entire school year. That's crazy. If the student surpasses their 6-visit limit, they'll have to stay after school and make up for the time they spent on the toilet. The rule was put into place by the school's principal, who claims that putting a cap on how many times a kid can go to the bathroom will leave more time for learning and will deter them from using the bathroom to look at their phones or take a break. Parents, of course, have backlash, saying that prohibiting their kids from going to the bathroom is silly and even borders on being dangerous. Some students argue that with only 5 minutes between classes, there's sometimes not enough time to relieve themselves, leaving them to pick a time during class to empty the hatch. One parent had to drive her son home halfway through the school day because he was having diarrhea, and if he stayed at school, he would surely use up his 3 poops a semester. It's a bit of an issue, because what if the student had a club meeting or has to catch the school bus? The bathroom trip could cause them to miss out on extracurriculars and leave them stranded with no way to get home. Urologists say that the rule would be hard to follow for kids with sensitive bladders, and that no one should be afraid to go to the washroom. A school in Nottinghamshire has decided to put the old hand raise to rest. Despite having 2 children with their hands raised as their school's logo, this British school has decided to go against centuries of schooling tradition and use their own method for questioning the students. The decision came about when the teachers were realizing that the same hands were going up when questions were asked, and it was usually the more confident, extroverted students. The school has implemented a more inclusive approach and will instead be picking students to answer questions, as opposed to choosing from hands going up. One parent noted that this isn't fair to the students who know the answer to not be able to put up their hand and instead to put a student who might not know the answer on the spot. Parents parents also think it'll make the children who are already shy and nervous even worse. Some consider it to be disrespectful toward the students and somewhat of an embarrassing practice. Teachers at Lincoln Public School were given a document outlining instructions on how to address middle school students who might identify as gender neutral. The instructions started out with creating classroom names and then inviting all the purple penguins to sit down on a rug. Wait, what? Purple Penguin? Sounds like a character off Dora the Explorer. Purple Penguin is considered the safe way to address a middle schooler when you don't know their preferred pronoun. It then says to ask the purple penguins to line up according to preferences, so whether they prefer juice or milk or dogs or cats. It's then advised to ask the penguins which pronoun they prefer. The teacher shouldn't insist that gender preference exists, and that they should encourage their students to see gender in a binary way. The teachers were also given a handout saying that gender isn't something that can be observed, only reported by the individual in question. Most teachers are actually quite happy with this change in addressing the students, saying it's not their place to interfere with politics. When you're living in the age of political correctness, you'll do anything to avoid offending people, even if it means canceling Christmas. Gasp! At a Frisco, Texas elementary school, items like Christmas trees, candy canes, and Christmas lights have been banned from the school's annual winter party. The school's principal sent out an email to all families letting them know that the PTA committee has decided to avoid using any Christmas-themed decorations this year and warned the parents against bringing snacks and decor that are of classic red and green Christmas color schemes. The weird thing about all this is Texas recently passed the Merry Christmas Law, which basically protects schools and organizations from having to censor religious references during the holidays. So technically, this school is allowed to put up Christmas decorations. Heck, they could even lay out a whole nativity scene if they wanted to. The bill even allows schools to display other holiday symbols like a menorah or Kwanzaa candles in plain view. After a parent complained to the district that the Frisco school was implementing this no Christmas rule, she was told that her kids are technically allowed to celebrate Christmas at school, according to district rules. A lot of parents thought that this banning of Christmas decor was almost draconian in nature, and isn't fair considering the majority of the student population at this particular school celebrate Christmas. I guess it's a little hard to stay jolly when you hear that the most wonderful time of year is being banned at your school. If you ask me, the principal sounds like a Grinch. Do you remember getting ribbons at your school-wide track day? Well, in more than half of the primary schools in the UK, winning isn't an option. In fact, at the end of sporting events, no one gets a medal. No one gets a ribbon. Winners aren't even announced. This is all in an attempt to avoid hurting any feelings and showing the students that everyone's a winner at the end of the day. Just the fact that you showed up and tried merits a reward. This new rule didn't go over so well with the parents. It was found that 82% of UK parents believe that losing is actually a good thing and allows kids to handle failure and rejection later on in life. On the other hand, about 14% were found to be in favor of the fair games and noted that children who are not naturally good at sports shouldn't be made to feel bad just because they aren't as strong or fast as the other kids. 18% of parents said that sporting events shouldn't generally be about competition but about having fun. Oh, isn't that sweet? Everyone had a best friend in grade school. In England, though, BFFs are actually banned. If a student is seen getting too friendly with one of his or her classmates, he or she might be brought to the principal's office for a good old talking to. Even 4-year-old Prince George isn't allowed to have a best friend at his high-end Thomas Battersea private school. What's a royal boy to do? There's even a policy that if your kid is having a birthday party, they can't hand out invitations in class unless everyone is invited, as to not hurt the feelings of the other kids. Seems pretty fair. This rule was put into action when a study revealed that kids become more well-adjusted when they have larger friend groups. These larger friend groups help to garner a sense of belonging in children and prevent them from getting traumatized from being rejected from the group. On the other hand, some people worry that by protecting their kids from getting left out, it will keep them from being able to handle rejection in their adult life. Regardless, it looks like this new trend is here to stay.
50 years ago, the world's technology looked completely different. Computers were both rare and the size of rooms. And there were maybe, 3 TV channels. Phones were firmly bound to the walls and featured no voicemail. And the average person rarely left their local area, much less their state or country. And nowadays, of course, computers are ubiquitous and portable. The choices for televised entertainment reach into the thousands. And it's easier than ever to zoom from one end of the world to the next. So what will the next 50 years bring? There's obviously no way to know for sure, but based on today's trends, there's plenty of possibilities. Let's take a look at what we can expect the world to become over the next half century. Quantum computing. Today's super smart computers.